The Mekong River. Endless, heavy rolling with mud and memory. Its waters swallow everything. Boats' bodies secrets, then carry them downstream as if nothing ever happened. To soldiers, it was not just a river, it was an enemy. A silent watcher. A presence. One night, deep in the war years, men on patrol swore they felt the current shift. At first just a subtle pull, then the sound like something vast turning beneath them. The water bulged. A shadow rose. Too large to be a fish, too steady to be driftwood. Rifles lifted, hearts raced, breath caught. Then silence. The surface calmed as if nothing had been there. Yet the soldiers stared at each other, pale, unwilling to break the moment with words. Villagers told the same tale. Fishermen claimed their nets tore apart as if ripped by unseen claws. Mothers whispered to children, "Do not go near the river at night." Some swore they saw eyes red in the moonlight, just above the rippling surface, watching unblinking. Others described a long, coiling mass that churned the water only to vanish before dawn. Official reports tried to capture it in stiff, cautious language, an unusual disturbance, a singular occurrence. But between the lines, the fear was clear. Whole patrols filed statements that contradicted each other, except for one detail. They all spoke of size, of something immense, alive, hidden. Imagine this: two armies at war, enemies, sworn to kill each other. Yet both sides wrote of the same thing. Both sides whispered of the same shadow. Both sides lowered their voices when the river was mentioned. So what was it? A monster of flesh and bone, a phantom dredged from ancient folklore? Or simply the fevered vision of men who had seen too much death? The Mekong does not answer. Its waters roll on, carrying truth and terror alike, leaving us with only fragments, whispers, and the chilling certainty that something once moved beneath those muddy waves. It was the late 1960s, the height of the war in Southeast Asia. The Mekong Delta, vast flat, a labyrinth of brown rivers, green rice paddies, and thick jungle, became both lifeline and battlefield. Patrol boats cut through the muddy channels, their engines echoing against mangrove roots, carrying men who were young, tired, and already marked by fear. On one side, American and South Vietnamese soldiers, pushing deeper into unfamiliar terrain. On the other, local villagers, fishermen, and guerrilla fighters bound to the river by birth and survival. Both lived with the Mekong every day. Both relied on its waters for food travel and refuge. And both quietly told stories of what lay hidden beneath it. The river itself seemed endless, 4,000 kilometers from the Tibetan Plateau to the South China Sea. But in this war-torn stretch, it was not just geography. It was a wall, a mirror, a boundary between the seen and unseen. At night, fog clung low across the surface, muffling sound, making even small ripples feel like signals from something vast. For soldiers, the Mekong was a place of ambushes, mines, and sudden attacks. But the official maps did not note the other dangers, the whispers of creatures too large for belief, too consistent to ignore. In their journals and debriefs, the words surfaced again and again: massive disturbance, unknown object, unexplained shadow. For villagers, the river was older than any war. They knew its moods, its currents, its floods. Yet they too spoke of encounters that could not be named. Fishermen refused certain bends of the river. Children were warned to stay away from whirlpools at dusk. Elders nodded in silence when asked, yes, something lives there. Something that has always lived there. And so, in this moment, the Mekong became more than water. It became a stage where war met myth, where modern weapons and ancient fears collided. A place where two enemies, soldiers and villagers, both described the same apparition. A giant presence, rolling beneath the muddy surface, vanishing before proof could be claimed. This is where our story truly begins, between fact and folklore, in a river that has carried both for centuries. The documents that remain are strangely cold, almost clinical. Yet between their lines, one senses the weight of fear. A U.S. Navy patrol log dated July 1967 records unusual disturbance noted at 0200 hours. Strong turbulence beneath the boat, no enemy fire detected, no debris recovered. Phenomenon remains unexplained. Nothing more, no speculation, just a terse report filed away, as if the truth might be too dangerous to admit. A South Vietnamese officer, writing in his after-action notes, described an event near Vinh Long province. A large mass was observed rising from the river. The craft shuddered as if struck from below. Crew fired several rounds into the water. No target confirmed. Incident classified as unidentified river obstruction. Once again, words chosen carefully distancing the witness from what he truly saw. Even the French decades earlier had left traces. Colonial-era archives mention la bête du Mekong, the beast of the Mekong. In one 1935 letter, an administrator wrote of fishermen refusing to work certain stretches, claiming nets were destroyed by something of extraordinary size. The phrasing is formal, almost dismissive, yet the echo of belief is there. American soldiers kept their own private journals, less polished, more raw. One note later found, in the belongings of a sergeant killed in action, reads, "Saw it again tonight." The water swelled under us like the back of a whale, but not a whale. Too long, too smooth. The men are shaken. We don't speak of it. Another diary entry unsigned, scrawled in pencil. If it is real, then it has been here long before us, and it will be here long after. Interrogation transcripts from captured guerrilla fighters are equally revealing. Asked about river defenses, one man answered flatly, "The river protects itself." When pressed, he gave no detail, only smiled thinly, as if speaking of something both known and forbidden. A CIA field memo declassified decades later contains a brief note in the margin almost overlooked, reports of large aquatic animal in Delta, multiple sources both sides. Recommend no further inquiry. The phrase "recommend no further inquiry" suggests more than doubt. It suggests a desire to close the matter, to silence curiosity. And yet, despite the caution of official voices, the details return again and again. Patrol logs, letters, statements, all pointing to disturbances of unnatural scale. None describe a creature outright. None commit to calling it real. But the pattern is there, undeniable. Singular disappearance, fate unknown, mysterious occurrence. Each phrase a fragment of testimony pieced together into something larger. The Mekong's secret lingers in the paper trail of war buried in reports filed under unexplained, whispered between soldiers, hidden between lines of type. Not proof, but enough to suggest that what the river held was not mere imagination. Long before the war, the river already had a voice of its own, and the people who lived along its banks listened. The Mekong was not just water, it was a spirit, a guardian, and sometimes an executioner. In Laos, old men spoke of the Phi Pa water spirits that took the form of serpents larger than boats. In Cambodia, the stories shifted to Nikta, ancestral protectors said to rise from the depths when the river was angered. Fishermen whispered that to disturb certain bends of the Mekong after nightfall was to invite disappearance nets, torn canoes, overturned men pulled under without a sound. Some called it the Naga, a sacred serpent from ancient tales. Carvings at Angkor show coils of immense size, mouths open, scales glinting. For centuries, the Naga had been a symbol of power, fertility, and the thin line between human life and the underworld. To see such a thing in the real river was said to be an omen, sometimes of abundance, sometimes of war. During the conflict, villagers merged the old beliefs with new fears. They told soldiers, both friend and enemy alike, that the river swallowed those who disrespected it. A patrol lost at night. It was not always the work of bullets. Sometimes it was the river spirit taking what it claimed. Children were warned not to laugh loudly near the water. After dark laughter, it was said, drew the creature's attention. Folklore bled into rumor. In one hamlet, Women claimed to hear drumming from beneath the waves, as if something vast was moving in rhythm below. In another, an old woman swore she saw a back as wide as 3 buffalo rise, briefly then vanish, leaving only whirlpools that spun for hours. Even among the soldiers, hardened by war superstition crept in. Some carried charms given by villagers, tiny naga carvings, strings of beads, or scraps of cloth blessed by monks. They told each other, never throw blood into the river, never wash weapons in it. The Mekong would remember. The Mekong would take its revenge. Stories crossed borders just as the river itself did. In Vietnam, whispers spread of a Tui Quai, a water demon so large that whole sampans disappeared in its wake. In Thailand, monks repeated warnings the Naga stirs when the balance is broken, when too much violence stains the water. And in every version, the same motif, something immense, unseen, waiting. It was no longer just a tale of myth. The war gave it flesh. Every ripple became suspect, every unexplained loss a confirmation. To those who lived and fought along the Mekong, the line between fact and folklore blurred until the river itself felt haunted, alive, and watchful. So when men spoke of what they saw, shadows, coils, waves without wind, they were not only reporting a phenomenon. They were feeding a legend, one that stretched back centuries and would outlast them all. The Mekong was not the only river whispered to have secrets. War, it seems, awakens old waters, pulling legends to the surface where they had long lain silent. In the jungles of Vietnam, soldiers patrolling the Perfume River near Hue told of sudden whirlpools that opened without warning. Entire sampans were said to vanish in a heartbeat. One U.S. Marine later confessed in his diary, "We fired at shadows in the water. I don't know if it was the enemy or something else, but the river seemed to fight back." His words were never part of the official report. Far away in Burma during World War II, British soldiers trudging through the Irrawaddy wrote of unseen beasts stirring beneath the muddy surface. A dispatch buried in the archives mentions phantom crocodiles of extraordinary length, a phrase that blurs the line between zoology and nightmare. Even the great Yangtze carried stories. Chinese villagers for centuries had spoken of dragons moving beneath its currents, creatures that surfaced only when turmoil swept the land. During the Sino-Japanese War, survivors whispered that strange waves followed troop barges, rocking them violently in calm weather, as if the river itself resisted invasion. The motif repeats itself across continents. Rivers as battlefields, waters as graves, and beneath them always rumors of something alive, something older than the conflict. The Mekong's legend, then, was not an isolated tale, but part of a wider pattern. Where men fought, the waters grew restless. Where blood spilled, the old creatures stirred. Perhaps it was coincidence. Perhaps only fear giving shape to the unknown. Yet whether in the Mekong, the Irrawaddy, or the Yangtze, the refrain remained the same: rivers remember. In war they become more than landscapes. They become witnesses. They become participants. And in their depths, men claimed lived forces no bullet could kill, no report could fully explain. And so the Mekong legend, soldiers and villagers, telling the same story in the same years, fits into a lineage of haunting waters. Each testimony, each archive, each whisper adds to the chorus. Different rivers, different wars, but always the same shadow beneath the current. Immense, unseen, and unwilling to be forgotten. The further one reads into the records, the more the story seems to collapse under the weight of silence. Files become thinner, words more carefully chosen, as if entire chapters were erased before they could be written. And yet what remains is enough to trouble even the most skeptical mind. In 1968, one of the darkest years of the war, a U.S. riverine patrol simply vanished. 5 men, their patrol boat last seen heading upriver near the Cambodian border. Days later, the vessel was recovered adrift, its hull twisted as if struck by an unseen force, the engine half torn from its frame. No bullet holes, no shrapnel, no scorch marks from explosives. And most chilling of all, no bodies. The log ends with only 4 words. Cause undetermined. Crew missing. The official story given to families was simple enemy ambush presumed dead. But soldiers in neighboring units whispered another version. They said the boat looked as if it had been lifted clean out of the water, smashed, and then dropped again. Not the work of men, one veteran muttered years later. It was the river. Vietnamese guerrillas told their own tales. One night, a squad attempted to cross the Mekong in silence, paddling beneath a thin moon. They never arrived. Days later, pieces of their canoe washed up along the sandbars, splintered wood-torn fabric, but no trace of the men themselves. No enemy claimed the strike. No survivor was ever found. When pressed, a villager simply shrugged and said, "The river took them." It always does. Testimonies began to clash in strange ways. An American gunner swore he saw a long black ridge rise out of the water, smooth, vast, rolling like the back of a whale. Another man from the same patrol described only waves, huge, violent, without a single visible object. And yet a third soldier, trembling under questioning, admitted, "I saw eyes. They were red just above the waterline, watching us." How could 3 men describe the same moment so differently, yet all speak with the same dread? Were they seeing different angles of the same truth? Or had the river conjured different visions for each of them? Then came the strangest detail of all the photograph that no longer exists. A young soldier claimed he had snapped a picture at the exact moment the disturbance erupted. The shutter clicked. The frame should have been clear. But when the film was developed, that single shot was ruined, blank, overexposed, as if swallowed by light. Every other picture on the roll developed perfectly. Only that one frame gone, destroyed. A memo found decades later in a declassified bundle adds another layer of unease. In the margins of an intelligence summary, an officer had scrawled, "Local superstition contaminating reports. Recommend deletion of incident. Recommend deletion. Not inconclusive, not dismissed, but erased." As though something had been witnessed that could not be allowed to live on paper. And still there are darker hints. Letters from soldiers that never reached their families. Half-finished sentences in notebooks, water-stained, ending abruptly. A Vietnamese partisan's whispered confession. "We did not fire." They screamed, and then the water closed over them. Each fragment adds to the terror not by what it reveals, but by what it withholds. The climax of the Mekong's legend is not one single sighting. It is the chain of absences, the trail of vanishing evidence. Missing men, missing reports, missing photographs. A river that consumes not only bodies, but also proof itself. Something vast moved beneath those waters. Something that resisted bullet and blade, archive and memory, photograph and testimony. The soldiers left when the war ended. The villages rebuilt. The patrol boats rusted on the banks. But the Mekong remained. Its waters rolled on heavy eternal, carrying with them a secret too large to surface and too dangerous to ever be forgotten. And if the river could speak, perhaps it would say only this: "I was here before you. I will be here after. And I will keep what I have taken." The Mekong flows on, wide, brown, and unbroken. Boats past nets are cast, children laugh on its banks. Life continues as it always has, yet the silence in certain stretches of water lingers. Places where the current deepens, where villagers still glance nervously, where soldiers long home from war refuse to speak. The records remain incomplete. Patrol logs that end in uncertainty, diaries that trail off mid-sentence, photographs missing from their rolls, whole crews listed as fate unknown. The official files offer no answers. The folklore offers too many. Between them lies only the weight of mystery. And so we are left to wonder, was it a beast of flesh and scale rising from some ancient lineage? A phantom born of fear and exhaustion, given form by war? Or a presence older still, the river itself alive, watching hungry? The question has never been settled. Perhaps it never will be. For each time the Mekong claims another life, whether by bullet current or something unseen, the story stirs again, whispered on both banks. The shadow beneath the surface, the eyes in the dark, the silence that follows. The river keeps its secret. Men come and go. Wars burn and fade. But the Mekong remains rolling steadily toward the sea, carrying both memory and myth, both fact and folklore in its endless flow. And if you ever find yourself drifting down that muddy expanse and the water swells suddenly beneath you, you may ask yourself the same question soldiers once whispered in fear. What truly moves beneath the Mekong? Perhaps we are not meant to know. And you have just listened to another file from Warfront Archives. If you wish to hear more, subscribe and return for the next case where history and mystery collide.